Good evening, class. I hope everybody is safe. Tonight's lecture will be Title 10 of the Revised Corporation Code of the Philippines. We will be talking about appraisal right. Now, our source materials are Partnerships and Private Corporations by De Leon and De Leon Jr. and also the Revised Corporation Code of the Philippines, a short introduction by Aquino and Aquino. So let's begin with the definition of appraisal right. As you have already noticed, we have referred to appraisal right in several of our discussions. However, this is defined only in Section 80. So, anong sabi sa Section 80? Sabi sa Section 80, appraisal right is the right of a stockholder to demand payment of the fair value of his shares after dissenting from a proposed corporate action involving a fundamental change in the corporation in the cases provided by law. So remember, in certain specific cases, may mga cases lamang wherein the law allows a stockholder to get out of the corporation even before it is dissolved. Why? Because remember, there is a fundamental change in the corporation that the stockholder did not anticipate at the time he made his investment. So, nung nag-invest siya dito sa corporation na to, hindi niya na-foresee, hindi niya na-anticipate na magkakaroon ng ganitong klase na substantial na pagbabago. That is why gusto niyang umalis doon sa corporation. Obviously, your stockholder, the stockholder who wants to exercise his appraisal right, disagrees with the fundamental change in the corporation. Kaya nga gusto na niyang umalis. So anyway, maganda ito para sa mga maliliit na corporations. Why? Because yung mga maliliit na corporations, yung kanilang stocks ay usually walang ready market na bibili sa kanilang mga stocks. Wala silang mapagbentahan, walang interesado. Why? Small corporation. Baka mamaya hindi rin kilala. Paano aalis ang stockholder na ito kung ganun ang case? Unlike in big corporations or yung corporations wherein the stocks are actively traded in the stock exchange, madali lang nilang i-dispose yung shares nila eh. Maraming may interest, maraming gustong bumili. But in small corporations, it can happen that nobody wants to buy yung shares ng isang dissenting stockholder. That is why maganda na may appraisal right. So it is the corporation who will purchase the shares from the stockholder at fair value. So anyway, please take note of the instances of appraisal right. Again, this enumeration is exclusive. Certain specified cases. Ito lang, wala nang iba. If it is not included in this enumeration, remember, the appraisal right cannot be availed of or exercised by a dissenting stockholder. Ito lang na nasa listahan. So what are the instances of appraisal right? Number 1, in case of any amendment to the Articles of Incorporation. But remember, not just any amendment. The amendment must consist or must have the effect of changing or restricting the rights of any stockholder or class of shares. Binago mo yung rights nila, ni-restrict mo yung rights ng mga stockholder na humahawak ng ganitong klaseng share. Number 2, or of authorizing preferences in any respect superior to those of outstanding shares of any class. So, merong isang group ng shares or isang class ng shares na nagkaroon ng preferences over other shares. Ikaw naman na nakahawak ka dun sa other share na yan, ay bakit ganun? Parang hindi mo gusto, ayaw mo na. So you can exercise yung appraisal right mo. What else? Number 2, in case of extending or shortening the term of corporate existence, if you are not agreeable to this, you can simply get out of the corporation. What else? Number 3, in case of sale, lease, exchange, transfer, mortgage, pledge, or other disposition of all or substantially all of the corporate property and assets including the goodwill. So, napansin mo, binebenta na lahat. bakit ka pa mag-stay sa corporation when they are no longer interested in yung keeping property for their operations. What else? Number 4, in case of merger or consolidation with another corporation. Number 5, in case the corporation decides to invest its funds in another corporation or business or for any purpose other than its primary purpose. So, they want to invest in another business. Kung hindi ka payag sa ganyan, maybe you do not have confidence in such other business, you can choose to exercise your appraisal right. What else? In cases of closed corporations, sa closed corporation, any stockholder for any reason can compel the said closed corporation to purchase his shares at their fair value, provided that the corporation has sufficient assets in its books to cover its debts and liabilities exclusive of capital stock. So remember, these are the only instances of appraisal right. If hindi siya enumerated here, appraisal right is not available. What else? The limitations on the exercise of appraisal right. Letter A, any of the instances provided by law for the exercise of the right by a dissenting stockholder must be present. So here again, kakasabi ko lang, inulit ko na naman. Kailangan yung instances ng appraisal right must be present or else the right is not available. What else? Number 2, the dissenting stockholder must have voted against the proposed corporate action. So obviously, yung dissenting, they voted against. Ayaw nila yung corporate action. Ayaw nila ng merger. Ayaw nila ng extending or shortening corporate term. Ayaw nila ng amendment which will restrict the rights, etc., etc. Ayaw nila. Kaya nga sila dissenting. Now, if you are not a dissenting stockholder, meaning pumapayag ka dun sa corporate action, you cannot exercise your appraisal right. Uy, may merger. Tapos, ikaw, ay, gusto ko ng merger. Tapos later on, nagbago yung isip mo. Ay, ayoko na pala ng merger. Can you exercise your appraisal right? Hindi. Because nung time na kinuha yung vote, ikaw ay pumayag. So, you are an assenting stockholder. Hindi ka dissenting. Remember. What if, ma'am/sir, nakalimutan kong bumoto noong meeting ng stockholders? Kasi nakikipagchismisan ka sa katabi mo, etc., etc. When the vote was taken, you failed to vote. Are you considered a dissenting stockholder? Tapos sabi mo pa, ay, ayoko talaga ng merger na yan eh. Considered ka ba as dissenting? Of course not. Why? Because you did not vote against the proposed corporate action. Hindi ka nga nag-vote eh. So, there must be a vote against the proposed corporate action. So, obviously, if you are absent during the meeting, you cannot also exercise your appraisal right because, again, you did not vote against the proposed corporate action. So, remember, dissenting ka. You must have voted against the proposed corporate action before you can avail of the appraisal right. What else? Written demand on the corporation for payment of his shares must be made within 30 days after the date the vote was taken. So, if the vote is taken today, you have 30 days to make a written demand on the corporation for the payment of your shares. So, you have simply 30 days to exercise your appraisal right. What else? The price or yung fair value. The price must be based on the fair value of the shares as of the day prior to the date on which the vote was taken, excluding any appreciation or depreciation in anticipation of such corporate action. So if the vote is taken today, the fair value is based not today, not tomorrow, but based yesterday. So yun ang tandaan nyo. On the day prior to the date on which the vote was taken. The vote is taken today. The basis of the fair value of the shares is yesterday. What else? fair value must be determined as provided by law. We will discuss more of that later on. Anyway, in letter C, kailangan lang naman ng determination ng fair value if the corporation and the stockholder do not agree on the fair value on the day prior to the date on which the vote was taken. Kung hindi sila nag-agree, meron tayong ibang procedure para i-determine kung ano yung fair value nung shares yesterday. So anyway, number 5, parang mali-mali yung numbering ko, no? So anyway, hindi pala numbering, lettering. A, B, C, D, E. Number 5, such fair value must be determined as provided for by law. Sinabi ko na yun eh. Payment of the shares must be made only out of unrestricted retained earnings of the corporation. Again, this is based on the trust fund doctrine. Kung walang URE, tapos bumili ka ng shares, remember Title 4, power to acquire own shares, anong limit doon? There must be unrestricted retained earnings. Except in the case of redeemable or callable shares. Yun lang naman ang exception. So anyway, di ko na alam kung anong number ito. Letter G actually. Upon such payment, the stockholder must transfer the shares to the corporation. So, shares of certificates of stock must be surrendered to the corporation, and the corporation will buy the shares from the stockholder. So, yung shares will be transferred to the corporation. So, anyway, what else? Procedure for the exercise of appraisal right. Again, the dissenting stockholder will make a written demand on the corporation within 30 days after date on which the vote was taken for payment of the fair value of his shares. Shortcut, exercise your appraisal right within 30 days from the date when the vote was taken, date of the meeting. So, what else? Number 2, within 10 days after demanding payment for his shares, a dissenting stockholder shall submit the certificates of stock representing his shares to the corporation for annotation that the shares are dissenting shares. So, surrender yung shares. Tapos, anong gagawin ng corporate secretary? Maglalagay lang siya ng notation na dissenting na yung shares mo. So, kailan mo gagawin yan? 10 days after kang nagbigay ng written demand. So, kung nagbigay ka ng written demand today, you have 10 days to surrender your shares. Also, you have 30 days to make your written demand. So, yun ang tandaan nyo. What else? Number 3, if the proposed corporate action is implemented or effected, the corporation shall pay to the stockholder the fair value of his shares. And number 4, upon payment of the agreed or awarded price, the stockholder must transfer his shares to the corporation, as I have already mentioned a while ago. So how about the determination of fair value? So remember, fair value again is the fair value of the shares on the day prior to the date when the vote is taken. So how to determine the fair value of the shares? Again, if the stockholder and the corporation, they agree already on the fair value on the day prior to the date when the vote was taken, wala tayong problema. Now, if there is disagreement, remember, there should be an appraisal of the stockholders' share or appraisal of the dissenting shares. Now, remember, yung appraisal must be made within a period of 60 days from the date the corporate action was approved by the stockholder. So, if they cannot agree, it shall be determined and appraised by 3 disinterested persons. So, kailangan mangyari ito within 60 days from the date the corporate action was approved by the stockholders. So, mag-hire sila ng 3 appraisers. So, 3 disinterested persons. 1 is named by the dissenting stockholder. Ang dissenting stockholder ang mamimili. Ang pinili ni stockholder ay si A. Tapos, the other one is chosen by the corporation. Ang pinili ni corporation ay si B. Sino ang pipili ng pangatlo? Ang pipili ng pangatlo ay si, not the corporation, not the dissenting stockholder, but ang pipili ng pangatlo ay si A and B. So, let us say A and B, ang pinili nila ay si X. So, si X yung pangatlong appraiser. Now, also remember, findings of the majority of the appraisers shall be final. And pagka nagkaroon na sila ng decision, ang tawag dun ay award. So, the award will be paid by the corporation within 30 days after such award is made. So, in award ngayon, 30 days to pay yung corporation. So, in such case, remember, pagka hindi na nagkakasundo, either the dissenting stockholder or the corporation is entitled to demand an appraisal of the former's share and to compel such appraisal if the other refuses to have it effected. So, kung ayaw ng stockholder na ipa-appraise yung shares niya, pwedeng i-compel ng corporation. Kung ayaw ng corporation na i-appraise yung shares ng dissenting stockholder, ipa-appraise yung shares ng dissenting stockholder, the dissenting stockholder can also compel such appraisal. What else? Continuing yung determination of fair value, yung valuation date, again, is, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina ulit-ulit, the day prior to the date on which the vote was taken, notwithstanding any appreciation or depreciation in value of the shares in anticipation of such corporate action. So this will prevent speculation on the shares. And again, payment must be made when there are unrestricted retained earnings. So, bakit kaya kailangan on the day prior to the date when the vote was taken? Kasi, remember, ang appraisal, ang purpose niyan is to compensate the dissenting stockholder for the value of his shares. Ngayon, yung value ng shares na to is the value of the stock as it was originally constituted. So, it will be determined without regard to the effect of the corporate action which was approved during the stockholders meeting na nag-disagree yung dissenting stockholder. So, yun ang tandaan natin. So, what is the effect now of appraisal? All rights accruing to such shares, including voting and dividend rights, shall be suspended. Wala munang rights, walang dividend, walang voting. What else? He shall be entitled to receive payment of the fair value of his shares as agreed upon between him and the corporation. So, kung may agreement, tatanggapin niya na yon. Mas madali kasi yun kung nagkasundo na lang. And also, or if that hindi nagkasundo, as determined by the appraisers chosen by them. What else? Payment of shares. If the dissenting stockholder is not paid the fair value of his shares within 30 days after the award, voting and dividend rights shall be immediately restored until payment of his shares. So as you can see here, walang provision in case of payment when there is an agreement. So, kung nagkaroon ng agreement, hindi sinabi na within 30 days babayaran ka agad yung shares. But obviously, if there is an agreement, malamang-lamang mabilis na ang bayaran dyan because the corporation and the stockholder, they agree. What the law provides is payment of 30 days from the date of award. So, pagka nagkaroon ng award, obviously, there is controversy regarding the fair value. Kaya kumuha pa sila ng mga arbitrators who determined pa yung fair value of the shares. What else? Upon such payment, nabayaran na, yung rights ng dissenting stockholder as a stockholder is terminated na. Wala nang, hindi na siya stockholder kasi nga na-buyout na ng corporation yung shares niya. What else? Number 3, if before he is paid, the proposed corporate action is abandoned, so hindi tinuloy yung merger, hindi tinuloy yung amendment which will restrict, etc., etc., his rights and status as a stockholder shall thereupon be permanently restored. Hindi na siya dissenting stockholder. Kasi nga, wala na yung proposed corporate action na pinagdadisentan niya. Inabandon na. So, there is no reason for him to exercise his appraisal right. So, matik na yon. he will be permanently restored to his status as a stockholder. What else? Extinguishment of the appraisal right, of the right to payment, or extinguishment of the appraisal right. Tama naman. It will be extinguished when the stockholder withdraws his demand for payment. And ito yung importante rin, the corporation consents thereto. Ayaw niya ng merger, puro merger ng example ko, no? Ayaw niya ng extending or shorten, ayaw niya ng extending ng corporate term. So he will exercise his appraisal right. Gumawa siya ng written demand for payment. Later on, nagbago siya. Sige na nga, okay na sa akin yung extending ng corporate term. So he will withdraw his demand for payment. So remember here, the corporation consents thereto, ma-extinguish yung kanyang appraisal right. What else? Number 2, proposed corporate action is abandoned or rescinded by the corporation. So, hindi na tinuloy yung proposed corporate action kung saan siya nagda-dissent. So, obviously, hindi na niya kailangang i-exercise yung kanyang appraisal right. The same is extinguished. Number 3, proposed corporate action is disapproved by the SEC. Again, let us say merger. But yung merger with another corporation is disapproved by the SEC. So, wala na yung merger na yon. Again, their appraisal right is extinguished. What else? SEC determines that the stockholder is not entitled to appraisal right. Also, please take note that if you do not file a written demand within 30 days to the corporation to exercise your appraisal right, this is a waiver of the appraisal right, even if you dissented to the proposed corporate action. Cost and expenses for appraisal. Sino ba ang nagbabayad? Under Section 84, the corporation will pay if the price offered by the corporation is lower than the fair value as determined by the appraisers. So, sabi ng corporation, kay dissenting stockholder, we are offering 100 pesos per share. Tapos si dissenting stockholder, malamang-lamang hindi siya pumayag. Tapos, syempre, pagka hindi pumayag, eto na, pasok na yung mga appraisers na ganyan. Pagpasok ng mga appraisers, in-appraise nila yung shares at 150. So, yun ang award nila, 150 per share. So, if the offer is of the corporation here is 100 and the award given is 150, remember, it is the corporation who will pay for the appraisal. Bakit? Kasi ang baba nung in-offer nila. Kumbaga, nilowball nila yung stockholder. Kawawa naman. So, sinong magbabayad ng appraisal? Corporation. What else? Action filed by the dissenting stockholder. An action is filed by the dissenting stockholder to recover yung fair value and yung kanyang and there is obviously a refusal to receive payment. And doon sa action filed by the dissenting stockholder, the court finds yung refusal to accept payment to be justified. Bakit? Again, because probably the price is very low. What else? It will be paid by the dissenting stockholder if, number 1, price offered by the corporation is approximately the same as the fair value ascertained by the appraisers. Sabi ng corporation, sige, bigyan ka namin 100 per share. Sabi ng corporation, ikaw naman, nagmaarte ka pa, ay, ayoko yan. So, anyway, yan, fast forward, andyan na naman yung mga appraisers. Tapos sabi ng appraisers, oo, 100 nga, arte mo kasi eh. So, dahil maarte ka, remember class, ikaw ang magbabayad ng, bilang isang dissenting stockholder, ikaw ang magbabayad ng appraisal. So, what about if the determination of the appraisers even lower than the offer made by the corporation? Sabi ng corporation, bigyan kita ng 100. Sabi ng mga appraisers, ay, actually 50 lang yan eh. Swerte ka na nga. Pero dahil maarte ka, remember, ikaw ang magbabayad ng appraisal. Not only that, marireceive mo yung award which is 50 pesos. So, wag ka maarte. What else? Number 2, where the same action is filed again by the stockholder. Ayaw niyang i-accept yung payment, tapos nagdemanda pa siya, and the refusal is found by the court to be unjustified. So, ikaw ang magbayad ng expenses for appraisal. So, dissenting shares, remember, 10 days, 10 days from the date of the written demand that you made, you have to surrender your certificates of stock to the corporate secretary. Tapos, the corporate secretary will make annotation doon sa shares that ilalagay lang sa certificates of stock na dissenting ang shares na to. Kung paanong paraan nila gagawin yan, bahala na sila. Iba-ibang diskarte yan. So anyway, the secretary of the corporation will be guided accordingly under Section 82 dahil mawawala ang voting and dividend rights niyan. Suspended lang naman. Hindi naman talagang nawala. So suspended until payment except as provided for under Section 82. Yan. What else? Pwede bang ibenta yung dissenting shares? Yes, actually, you can sell yung dissenting shares. Kasi, malay nyo, may nagka-interest na bumili at the price that you want pa. So, you can sell yung dissenting shares. Now, yung dissenting shares, yun nga, shares represented by the certificates of stock bearing such a notation that they are dissenting shares may be transferred or sold by the dissenting stockholder. As owner, you have the right to dispose. Kaya, pwede pa rin ibenta ng dissenting stockholder yung kanyang dissenting shares. What else? Number 2, the transferee shall become a regular stockholder with right to receive all dividend distributions which would have accrued to such shares. Now, the transferee, obviously, is not a dissenting stockholder. Bakit ka naman bibili ng shares na ibebenta mo uli sa corporation? Hindi. If you buy shares from a dissenting stockholder, you will become a regular stockholder. Yan. What else? The right of the transferor as a dissenting stockholder to be paid the fair value of his shares shall cease. Because remember, when he sells his shares to a third person, he is no longer a stockholder. So, wala na rin siyang right to be paid the fair value of his shares. Kasi nga, hindi na siya stockholder. So, obviously, hindi na rin siya dissenting stockholder. So, wala na rin siyang right na mabayaran ng fair value of shares niya. So, saan niya makukuha yung payment niya? From the buyer of the shares or the transferee of the shares. So, yun ang tandaan natin sa appraisal right. That would be all for Title 10. Please stand by for Title 11, Non-Stock Corporations. Thank you, class, and have a good night.